we can support mitochondrial health too by making sure that we have all of the right ingredients to make energy. If our body doesn't have the ingredients to make energy, it's not going to make it. And there we are trying to grow an egg without having all the right, raw materials.
You're listening to episode number 97 of the MomTales with Christa podcast. I hope you are having a great week so far. Of course, if you're listening on or watching on YouTube, it's way more than number 97. We kind of just started numbering them with the podcast because that was kind of when it officially or more officially became a show, I guess I should say. But in reality, we had been doing the show almost 2 years before it was even a podcast. So there's way more content. If you are just listening on the podcast and you haven't dove into that side of it yet, check out our YouTube channel for sure, because there's lots of shows and content that haven't quite made its way to this podcast platform yet. So we kind of interchangeably now use the audio. So I just want to encourage you guys to be able to check out both for your convenience, because they kind of work different ways. And this is kind of just like an off tangent thing, but they kind of work in different ways. If there's some interviews where I like to sit and watch the interview happen. I like to see the person being interviewed. And other times I like to, when I'm in the car driving or something, I like to listen on a podcast. Just makes it easier, more convenient if you're trying to get something done. So if you're a very loyal listener on one side of things, I encourage you to try the other and just kind of see how you like it. But anyways, we are in September. We are in September. Fall is just a few short weeks away, and I truly cannot wait. I swear every year I get more and more excited for fall. Growing up, I was such a summer kid, and I still love the summer, but fall is where it's at. Warm drinks, big sweaters. Yeah, fall leaves. I don't know, all that good stuff. Anyway, so today's guest on the show is Kaylee Frazier. She is a registered dietitian. We're going to talk about feeding fertility, and she talks about the root cause of infertility and recurrent miscarriages. So she shares a lot of great information. I'm going to get to that in just a minute. I'll kind of talk about some updates, housekeeping. I can't remember what I actually started calling them before, but so just a reminder that this month, the month of September, is Baby Safety Month. So throughout the month, we will be sharing different posts, resources, and tips on social media about baby safety. Just because there's a lot that constantly changes, just this year, an update about SIDS came out. There's new research about SIDS. There's things that are always changing and being updated. So we're going to try to share the latest. We're going to reshare other people's posts as well, just to kind of keep you in the know. And then you can, tag your friends, share with your friends as well. This is just something that's so important. It's baby safety. This is something that people are constantly trying to improve and work on. I talked about Michelle Pratt last week with Safe in the Seat. I cannot recommend her page enough. She just talks about car seat safety. She's a car seat safety technician. So she knows her stuff. And it's something that's very important because it can save a life. Last week's episode was a solo pod where I talked about the 3 parts of self-compassion. If you are having a hard time loving yourself, giving yourself grace, being kinder to yourself, I highly, highly encourage it. Because sometimes I think it takes breaking down and understanding what it is in order to understand how we can do it for ourselves. So basically, it talks about how we are so quick to have compassion for other people. Like if we're out on the street and someone falls, we're like, oh my gosh, are you okay? Like that curb, is bumpy. Or, there was a ledge, or, it came out of nowhere, whatever. We are so kind to other people when things like that happen. Or if they drop something, oh, here, let me help you. It could have happened to anyone. But if the same thing happens to us, our inner critique and our inner voice is so mean to ourselves. We put ourselves down. We call ourselves names. We say we're so dumb. How could we do that? And we just become so critical of ourselves. And so it's an episode with a lot of great reminders as how we can become more aware of how we speak to ourselves. And the other side of that is when we learn to speak to ourselves kindly and give ourselves grace, our children see it. Because whether you believe it or not, if the way we treat ourselves, our kids see it. And so starting with ourselves is a great way for our kids to start with themselves. Of course, it depends on, their age and what they're able to pick up right now, but kids pick up a lot that we are not aware of. And one thing I want to remind you guys of is it's definitely not something we just decide. It's an uphill, like we're like, yeah, we flip this switch and yes, I have so much self-compassion. It's an effort that we have to make every day. And just being more aware of it is a start. There's going to be some days that we're going to do great. And we're like, I was so kind to myself today. It was awesome. Pat on the back. But other days, we're going to struggle with it. And that's okay. And it's part of the process. It makes us human, And that's the same with self-love, We can tell ourselves like we love ourselves, but there's going to be some days where we just don't feel like we love ourselves. And that's okay. And it's part of the process. I would say self-love and self-compassion are a journey. They're not just a flip of a switch. It's not just an on and off button. It's a journey. You're going to go up and down. You're going to have ebbs and flows. And that's with life. So yeah, go back and listen to that episode if you've not listened to it. It was a repeat of a peanut pod that just went really well. And I just want to share it with you guys so you can see what you guys can get on these peanut pods. So up next week, we talk with Dr. Wendy Bartley, and I love talking with her. She is just a ray of sunshine. Like, she was so sweet to talk to. I felt like I had known her for years, just a really kind person. So she shares an amazing story. So first, she talks about overcoming overwhelm. And when you listen to this, you're gonna be like, wow, she definitely had to deal with some overwhelm. She shares an amazing story about finding out she was pregnant with twins when her son was 7 months old. Like, can you imagine? Maybe it happened to some of you guys, but finding out you're pregnant with twins in general can be a lot. Finding out you're pregnant in general can be a lot. But finding out you're pregnant with twins when your son is only 7 to 8 months old. She talks about, we were just kind of figuring out still how to be parents. And then we get this news that I'm having twins. So that can be a really, scary and intimidating thing. So she talks about how it was really hard work finding balance and eventually accepting it. And it pushed her into the work she does today. She works with so many women and helps them with overcoming this overwhelm. And I just really enjoyed talking with her. So that is next week on the podcast. Today at 11 a.m., you might be listening to this too late, but I want you to get ready for next month. So today at 11 a.m. Central, we have our September Facebook room meetup, and we're talking about 3 parts of self-compassion, what I kind of just talked about, but in a deeper discussion sense. So our Facebook rooms are set up to where, it's like Zoom. If you guys haven't done Facebook room, it's like Zoom. So you can see each other, hear each other. Of course, we have some people that turn their cameras off, turn their microphones off, but it's a discussion and we can share ideas. We can share struggles we're having, all that good stuff. And so we work together, and we're just going to talk about the 3 parts of self-compassion, how we can be more compassionate to ourselves. So please join our Facebook group if you are not already in it. The link to join are in the show notes. And once you join, you can check out our events tab, and there's all the events upcoming there as well. We do those once a month. Our next peanut pod, just talking about a peanut pod. Our next one is Thursday, September 15th. That's next Thursday at 1 p.m. Central. We're talking about one of my favorite topics because it completely changed my life when I kind of looked into it more. And that's negative thoughts and how we can reprogram our brain with little things each day. It's really amazing how being more aware of things, of how we talk to ourselves, the things we surround ourselves with can change how we talk to ourselves, how our kids talk to themselves, and our overall outlook on life. So we're talking about how to reprogram your brain. We've covered something like this similarly before, but I just thought we could use a refresher with some new tips and new perspectives. For future Peanut Pod dates, please join my group on Peanut called Mom Talks with Christa, and I always post them in there. We have regular discussions in there as well. It's kind of like a little mini Facebook group. Okay, that's all I have for updates, guys. I know that was a lot. We've got another great month of interviews, and I cannot wait to share with you guys. And now on to today's interview with Kaylee Frazier, talking about feeding fertility. She was so insightful, and I can't wait for you guys to listen. All right, here you guys go, and I'll meet you at the end for our Mom Tales of the week. Enjoy. All right, guys, today on the podcast, I have Kaylee Frazier, who is a dietitian for fertility. She talks all about how nutrition can help improve your egg quality. And we talk all about just different approaches to fertility and what can affect your fertility, some of the root causes of fertility issues and miscarriage. It was such an eye-opening conversation, and she's so knowledgeable about the topic. So if you or someone you know is struggling with fertility or has questions when it comes to having a baby or having your next baby, I highly recommend you check out this episode. She's just a wealth of information. So check out this interview I have with Kaylee Frazier. First, can you just tell us about you and what you do?
Well, I have been a registered dietitian for 10 years, and I have worked in kind of an outpatient clinical setting for most of those years. And in the past year, I've gotten interest in fertility and women's health and functional nutrition. And here I am starting this new journey on my private practice in functional nutrition for fertility. So that's a kind of a professional side of me. Personally, I'm a mom of 2 littles. My daughter is almost 4 and my son is 2. So we are very, very busy and just loving life and loving helping other women become moms too, and men become fathers. So
Awesome. Very cool. And so how did you make the shift and get into like the work you do with helping moms in their fertility journey?
Well, like so many who end up in this route, it all starts a bit personal. I was, after my son was born, I really struggled with how I was feeling. I just was not feeling good. I felt tired. I was losing weight. I was dizzy all the time. And like sometimes to the point where I was like, am I even able to take care of my kids alone? Because I felt so horrible. Went to the doctor, they ran tests, everything was normal, and just anxiety. Sure, yes, anxiety, but there was more. So I kind of started using my nutrition background to kind of dig around a bit more, figure out what else it could be, because I was like, I can't accept that this is just anxiety. And I did. I figured some things out about myself and kind of got myself straightened back out a bit. But in that process, I ran across all of this information about how powerful nutrition is for helping couples to conceive naturally. And I just could not believe that this wasn't first line or even talked about as an option in 90% of the cases. So I just fell in love with researching and learning so much about this area of nutrition, and just haven't looked back, really, to be perfectly honest. Just refound a love of nutrition in this area.
I love like hearing the stories of how people got into the work that they do. And that's cool. It was almost like your calling, like it kind of just showed up and you're like, this is so interesting to me, and how can I help other people? So I think that's really fascinating.
Yeah.
So to start, so how can we use nutrition as a way to improve our egg quality?
Yes, I love this question. I love talking about egg quality. So women are born with all of our eggs. We have them from the time we're born, but they're suspended in our ovaries in a time capsule where they're just kind of like hibernating, tightly protected inside of our ovaries. And then when we start menstruating, every month that we start to ovulate, we bring out a handful of those eggs and they start to mature. And in the 90 to 100 days leading up to ovulation, that is when most or any DNA damage that will happen to the egg occurs. So the idea that we're like born with a bad set of eggs is false, unless some type of like genetic chromosomal thing that's like genetic. But any of like the variations or mutations that happen at the time of ovulation or the couple months leading up to. So egg quality is totally modifiable. There are 2 main things that can impact egg quality. So I'm just going to step a tiny bit on the science side and throw out a couple terms that maybe are a little bit intimidating if you don't have a science background. But the first has to do with oxidative stress. So oxidative stress is basically the imbalance between reactive oxygen species, or sometimes they're called free radicals, and antioxidants. So when this system gets out of whack and we have more of the bad guys, which are the free radicals, and not enough of the good guys, which are the antioxidants, the free radicals kind of have free range and they'll react with anything. And when they react with things like our cell membranes or our DNA, they can cause damage. And that damage can't be fixed. It's happened. In most cases, eggs have a little bit of ability to repair. But so what we want to do, one way we can support egg health is by helping this oxidative stress situation by making sure that there is the correct ratio of antioxidants to free radicals. We can also help to cut back on the amount of free radicals that are in our body. And while it is normal to have them, completely normal, it's part of our metabolism, honestly, we can watch out, like in our environment, what types of things we're exposed to that worsen the free radical exposures. So that's really the first thing we can do for egg health. All has to do with oxidative stress. Mm-hmm. The second has to do with mitochondrial function. So again, another kind of big term, if you're not sciencey, and your mind might be going back to like 6th grade biology class.
Yeah.
But the mitochondria, for those who don't want to remember back to 6th grade, is the spot in our cell where all of our energy is produced. And those 3 months leading up to ovulation, where our egg is developing, is extremely energy heavy. Our eggs use a lot of energy to go through that final phase of development. And in those months where we're making all of this extra energy, basically, if we don't make enough of it, the cell division and growth doesn't happen properly. And there too, we can end up with some issues with the DNA material in the egg, which will make a less quality egg, less likely to get fertilized. If it is fertilized, less likely to implant. If it does do all of those things, it's more likely to end in a miscarriage. Unfortunately, it's our body's way of naturally weeding out a pregnancy that won't be viable for the full 9 months, or would put mom in danger if it did stay viable. So we can support mitochondrial health too by making sure that we have all of the right ingredients to make energy. If our body doesn't have the ingredients to make energy, it's not going to make it. And there we are trying to grow an egg without having all the right, raw materials. So those are the 2 big ways we can help support and improve egg quality with nutrition.
Wow. Okay. Wow. There's so much there that I'm like, oh, which angle do I want to keep going with this? So you're talking about energy, feeding into that mitochondrial energy, if I'm using that term correctly. I do feel like I'm in 6th grade science. I'm like, oh, okay. But no, so feeding, how do you feed that directly into that energy? Is this directly nutrition? You said it could be environment and nutrition. So what are some things that people can kind of look for in their diet that kind of feeds into that energy and helps with that?
Yeah, great question. So what we're thinking about when it comes to mitochondrial health, like I said, is having basically the raw ingredients there. So one of the big ones that's actually incredibly well studied, and you may even hear this in your doctor's office or OBGYN or reproductive endocrinologist, it's pretty well known, but CoQ10. So CoQ10, a lot of people maybe think statins, which is, yes, it's often used with statins. But when we're talking fertility, CoQ10 is the last step of making energy. So if our body gets through the entire process of making energy and this final receptor of an electron isn't available, there the process ends. So that is one way that we can help to support the mitochondrial function, is by making sure there's enough of this CoQ10, and not even that it's just CoQ10, but that it's the right kind of CoQ10, just to make things one step more confusing. So there's different forms. There's CoQ10, which our body has to metabolize a bit to make it in the right form that we can use. You can also buy a supplement called ubiquinol, which is in its active form already, which means when you take it, it gets into your cells, it's ready to go. There's no more metabolism or breakdown or activation that needs to happen.
And so, all right, when we're we're kind of talking about, you talk about the egg quality, and then if it does, even if like maybe like it's not a very healthy egg makes it past a certain point, it could be, more likely to end in a miscarriage or have, issues down the line. So what are some of the other root causes or along with this, root causes for, infertility or other miscarriages that women might see?
Yeah, so egg quality is definitely one like that is prevalent. And I should just quick say, like egg quality can be addressed in women of all ages. It's oftentimes thought of more as like over 35 as an egg quality thing. And that's where you're considered geriatric in the world of reproduction is after 35. But egg quality can be addressed really at any age. So even if you're 23 and having recurrent miscarriages, it still is something to look into as a potential reason as to why you're having miscarriages. Other things like nutrition wise that really affect fertility, many different facets, to be perfectly honest. So paths that we can go down are all completely individual based on what we get from our initial conversation, kind of what comes up when we're talking, and then the testing that we do. But a couple examples is actually like undiagnosed celiac disease. There is a statistic out there, and it's not coming to my mind at the top of my head, but most people who have celiac disease are actually undiagnosed. And someone who has celiac disease doesn't always present with the GI symptoms. So it might not be diarrhea and cramping and weight loss. It might be infertility is the sign that you're getting that you have celiac disease. So that is something to consider nutrition wise. We can also look at autoimmunity and specifically with the thyroid. So again, like thyroid stuff starts to develop pretty early on, even before a doctor would catch it on a lab test. So taking a look at that, and trying to catch those early fluctuations in thyroid health and treating or supplementing and supporting that with the right nutrition. We could also look at sources of inflammation. So inflammation might be something like you're eating a food that just doesn't sit well with you, or it might be something along the lines of like leaky gut. Leaky gut is a pretty well accepted now thought of what could happen when our GI system isn't well taken care of, and we end up getting this issue where food kind of gets into places where it's not supposed to and activates all these extra responses in our body. And basically we have an SOS signal going off all the time. Our body's not going to get pregnant when it thinks there's danger. So that's another possible route we could go. Micronutrient deficiencies is another way we can go. So really, there's just all these different paths we go, and it's kind of like a choose your own adventure based on what we find during our conversations.
Oh, interesting. So it's through kind of like a questionnaire, some testing to kind of see what kind of relates to each person.
Yeah. Yeah, it really is super individualized. And it comes down to testing. We look at stool samples, we look at micronutrient status, we look at hormones, we track the menstrual cycle, and we use all of that to just gather as much data, including family history too. So of course, people who have family members, first-degree family members who have an autoimmune condition, whether it's rheumatoid arthritis or celiacs or type 1 diabetes, they're more likely themselves to have an autoimmune condition too. So that's an important piece of information. So yeah, it's really just gathering a bunch of data and then kind of going down whichever path will bring us towards healing.
Wow, interesting. Yeah, I would never have put celiac disease along with infertility. So that's stuff like that. That's so interesting to hear.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
And so you talk about the fertility diet. And so tell me about that. What kinds of foods does it include and what does it not include?
Yeah, I'd love to. So starting off, first time I meet with people and we start gathering information and learning about one another, this is the first thing I start pretty much everyone on is just a way of eating that supports fertility. So what it is, baseline for everyone who I meet with, is a Mediterranean style diet. So Mediterranean diet, of course, is one of the best studied diets out there, if not the best studied diet out there. It helps with so many conditions from heart disease to inflammation to everything in between. It also can help with fertility. It's just a really great all-around diet. Now, the thing, extra add-on on top of just a Mediterranean style diet is we do emphasize the inclusion of animal products as part of our version of the Mediterranean diet. So if I just back up one step, Mediterranean diet, it includes a lot of vegetables, some fruits, whole grains, proteins, and lots of fat. So it is not a low-fat diet where we would be trying to use low-fat products. We want to use fat, lots of fat. Fat is good. But we also are going to include carbohydrates from the things like whole grains and from fruits and from beans and lentils. And then we also have our protein. And I don't encourage people to follow just a plant-based diet. I want people to be eating meat and eating beef and having dairy, full-fat dairy, and including chicken and wild-caught salmon and wild game. So all of those types of proteins are totally included as part of the fertility diet. Now, the one thing to add in about the protein is there is strong support that having these proteins come from the highest quality sources is going to be pretty crucial. So this would be a place, if possible, to stretch your budget to try and find and use grass-fed beef or free-range chickens or free-range eggs that have been fed a natural diet or wild-caught salmon. So we don't want to compromise really there too much. We really do want to try and include those types of animal products.
Yeah, I haven't heard too much about the Mediterranean diets, but that's really good to know. And I think it's good to note too, like that fat is really good, because I think I was just talking to someone about like negative, I don't know about negative, but like years before they were like, oh, get low fat everything, watch your fat intake, and so it was this like negative connotation associated with high fat foods. And so I think it's really important that you just mentioned that fat is good.
That is good. Yes.
Want that. So what other kinds of things can affect fertility? I know we kind of talked into environment earlier, but kind of diving into what does that mean? Our environmental factors, genetics, what other specific things can we look out for?
Fertility is really an extension of overall health. So that is one way to look at it. It's not that you are just infertile. I actually really despise the word infertile because there are so few people in this world who are actually infertile. So say like both your fallopian tubes are blocked. Okay, yeah, that's fine. That's maybe classified as infertile. But a lot of what we're seeing today, especially in this like unexplained infertility diagnosis realm, is just an idea, or like my idea, that something is really blocked, that there's something that's in the way of fertility. And if we can figure out what that is and fix it, then fertility will follow behind it. Mm-hmm. And right now you might not be having any other outward symptoms. Right now there might not be any other signs of a diagnosis. So when you go to your doctor, they say, yeah, everything looks fine. But 15 years down the road, if you don't get this taken care of, maybe there will be a diagnosis at that time. Something that could be prevented if we looked at things a little bit earlier using this different type of lens as like extremely, extremely preventative before symptoms even arise. So things like that, I already talked about, like gut health and chronic inflammation. Like is your body inflamed from the types of foods you're choosing? But you also threw out genetics. So our genetics play a big part of who we are, but they're by no means a direct extension of who we are. Genetics are just what we're predispositioned to. I will say one thing about, one common thing that people in the infertility space talk about is the MTHFR genetic variation. Mm-hmm. So that one has to do with folate metabolism and has been linked to recurrent miscarriage. But again, it's not a set in stone thing. I happen to know that I have the most severe type of this mutation where my enzyme is theoretically reduced to 30%. I didn't know this until after I had successfully completed 2 pregnancies without, with no concerns. Whereas, I've talked to other women who have, what's considered more of a mild variation of this variation, or milder case or milder type of this variation. And they do experience recurrent miscarriage. So we can't say that having that is just like, oh, there, we figured it out. You have an MTHFR mutation, throw some different folate at you, and the problem solved.
Yeah, that's good to know that it's every case. Well, it's good, but it makes it kind of difficult too, to be like, okay, every case is so different. But it's also good that we can't just, say like, oh, well, that person has that. And so, it's obvious what it is. I think everyone's a little bit different. And so what can our menstrual cycles teach us or show us about our fertility and our overall health?
Yeah, menstrual cycles. It's something that no one talks about, at least doesn't talk about enough. And I am floored that I didn't learn all of this until after I had 2 kids. This just happens to women. We don't really know. And it's not our fault because no one's told us, and no one told our mothers. Maybe no one told our grandmothers. It's just not common knowledge that our menstrual cycles are such a vital, integral part to our health, and something that we could be more aware of and keeping track of what's going on in our bodies. So I do have everyone start tracking their menstrual cycle and start teaching about what signs of fertility to look for. There's 3 main signs of fertility. There is cervical mucus, which is the substance or sticky kind of goo that you get around the middle of your cycle typically. And it has a lot to do with prepping your body up for ovulation. Then we also track basal body temperature, which of course is a great way to confirm whether or not you're ovulating. Some women maybe have a period or, a bleed every single month, but they don't have ovulation. So what they're experiencing isn't actually a period, it's just an ovulatory cycle, and that happens. And if you think you're having a period every month and you're really scratching your head about why you're not getting pregnant, and we start tracking basal body temperatures and you're like, oh, I don't ovulate. Okay, well, now we have something to work on and something to try and figure out what we can do to get you ovulating. And then the last fertility sign is cervical position. So your cervix actually changes height, it changes feel, it opens more as you get towards ovulation. So by knowing where your cervix is, it also is a sign of how are your hormones signaling correctly? Is your body getting all the right signals for hormones to do what they are intended to do? So it's just a way to kind of get a pulse of what's going on with your menstrual cycle and your fertility.
Yeah, that's so interesting, just how it tells us so much about our bodies and our health. And so you talk about, women that maybe have their period every month, but then they aren't ovulating. And that's, the reason maybe they're not getting pregnant. And so I guess I'm it's one of those things where you're taught younger, oh, you have your period and then you ovulate. And so what does it mean? If someone's not ovulating, and then what are different things that women can do to make sure they do start ovulating?
So first and foremost, you'd want to confirm ovulation. And in my opinion, the best way to do that is with tracking your basal body temperature. Things like the OPKs, where you're testing for a luteal surge. First of all, you can get a little bit confusing because some conditions like PCOS, you kind of have this oddly fluctuating LH frequently throughout your cycle and has nothing to do with ovulation. So that's kind of not the greatest. So if you see a body temperature shift while you're tracking your basal body temperatures of at least a 0.5 degree, that's a sure sign that you've ovulated, because there's no other way that shift would happen unless you ovulated. So that would be a great first start. So just to kind of get an idea of if you're ovulating. If you find out after tracking your cycle that you're not ovulating, then it would be time to start looking for why. And again, we would go down all these different rabbit holes to figure out why. Do you have celiac disease and no one's ever looked into it. And you didn't know because this is the only odd thing that's ever happened, is that you don't ovulate. Are you having an issue with your estrogen and you're not properly making estrogen, or you're over converting it to other things? Are you under eating? Like, under eating in women, so common. Women can't live on 1,200 calorie diets, and you put your information into MyFitnessPal and you say you want to lose 2 pounds a week, and it spits out that you're supposed to be eating 1,200 calories. No, that's not enough for a toddler. You need to be eating more. And if you're not eating enough, your body's not going to ovulate. So that's another thing. Eating not enough of the right nutrients. If we're not supporting all of the nutrients that fuel into ovulation, it's just not going to happen. And you might still cycle to some degree where you still bleed, but you're not making an egg and popping out an egg and having a chance at conception then.
Wow. Yeah. There's so many angles that I feel like we're not regularly talked to about or told about. And so this is so interesting. I feel like I could talk to you forever because I find this stuff so fascinating because like I said, it's not in like the school system. You're not taught it as a woman, like growing up. So all these different angles are so interesting. And I know you also have a 16-week course. So what does your course look like for women? What does it entail? And what kind of people do you want taking the course, I guess?
So I have a 16-week course. It's called Feeding Your Fertility. It's one-on-one, and partners are encouraged to come too, because ladies, this isn't just a woman's thing. Like, fertility isn't just a woman's thing. Somewhere between 30 to 50% of fertility issues are related to the partner. So to put this solely on the woman is not fair. So 16 weeks for just you and your partner, you have access to me. What we do is, like I said, we start off with just a diet reboot. We talk about the fertility diet. We talk about how that would look for your life. We brainstorm meal plans, make sure you're on the right page of knowing what to eat for your fertility. During that time too, we're collecting tests. So we take a look at a lot of these things that I talked about. We screen for celiacs. Of course, I can't diagnose, I'm not a doctor, but we can screen for it. And if something comes back and showing that you might, we'll send you to your doctor to go in for a confirmation test. We can look for like thyroid health. We look at all of that. We look at inflammation and are there inflammatory markers in your body? We take a look at blood sugar balance. So we take a real deep look at blood samples. We also take a look at micronutrient status. So I get a micronutrient panel that will tell us more specifically what nutrients you could be low in and how that could be influencing certain pathways in your body. We take a look at your stool and your gut health. Do we need to work on gut health? And then lastly, we look at your hormones with a hormone test. So we gather up all of that information on the lady, on the woman in the partnership. We also take a look at stress. I did talk at all about stress today, but man, that can have trouble, wreak havoc on reproduction. We take a look at stress. We take a look at the partner. We talk about sperm. I already said that. We need to have healthy sperm too. And the parameters for sperm health that come back on a sperm analysis aren't maybe up to par if you're trying to conceive naturally. So that's a whole nother conversation, but we do talk about sperm health. So my course, we have lots of one-on-one sessions. We do all this testing to try and figure out what's going on in your body. And then we create a personalized plan for you and your partner to do what you need to do to get your body back on track. Yeah.
Oh, wow. That's amazing. Yeah. That's a very in-depth course. And it sounds like you look at all angles. And I love that you bring up partner's health as well, too, because I think so many times we just look at the woman and we're like, oh, that infertile word again, like, oh, she's infertile, without actually looking at the partner as well and seeing both of their health.
Right.
Do you think a lot of the same or a lot of the similar health or environmental things you talked about with affecting women's fertility can also affect men's fertility?
Definitely. Yes. So male fertility is the same in some regards, in that it's can be damaged by things like oxidative stress that we talked about at the beginning. So that is a huge part of male fertility, making sure that the right nutrients are there. Sperm, men make like 10 million sperm per day, I think. I can't remember the exact figure, but it's like an insane amount. And even to tell you that, it's significantly down from 50 years ago. So overall, men have less sperm. Research has shown that, like, there's something that's cutting down on men's sperm health. And the three main areas that have been hypothesized are toxic exposures, poor diet, and the rise of obesity. All three are related to lifestyle, right? So these are things too that we can totally look at in men's health. The interesting thing about men's health that's a little different than women's is it's just, I shouldn't say it's interesting, it's far more basic. So there's not all these like hormone surges and this happens at this time of the month and we need this to hit this level for this to happen. Men make sperm every day, all day long. The only possible thing that could be a problem is if their testosterone is low. I mean, among other things, like we talked about with the environmental exposures, but the whole process of it is far less intricate than us ladies have. So it is a bit more basic to address. That's why women, in my opinion, get more attention, is because there's a lot of moving parts going on.
Right.
But men's health, can't be underscored with how important it is.
So interesting. And so where can everyone follow you and find more information about what you offer, your course, and all that stuff?
So I have a website, KayleeFrazierNutrition.com. I'm also on Instagram, feeding.fertility.rd. I also have a free Facebook group. So if anyone is interested in joining the free Facebook group, it's also Feeding Your Fertility on Facebook. So hope to hear from you, ladies and gentlemen, who are working on conceiving. See if I can give you a hand.
Amazing. I love that. And I always like to end these interviews with a fun thinking question, I call it. So if you could have a billboard made today, we could share one tip with moms everywhere. What would you have it say?
I would have to say everything passes. So that is what I tell myself every day with my kids. If we're in the middle of a tantrum or someone's not sleeping or it's just a really trying moment, I just tell myself in my mind, this is going to pass. And whether it's 10 minutes from now, 2 hours, or tomorrow, this moment will be gone and we'll be back to enjoying another fun moment.
Awesome. I love that. Awesome. Well, thank you so much for coming on. This was a great topic to have. And I think so many women have questions about it. And so you just kind of open up this whole new horizon, whole new space of people that can kind of come to you for any questions or concerns. So thank you.
Thanks for having me.
All right, guys, it is time for our Mom Tales of the Week. And we'd like to do your mom confessions at least once a month, just because it's such a wide range of responses. So this is the time we're going to do your mom confessions. And I like this too, because it's kind of a guilt-free, just get it out, be real, connect with other moms. Because I feel like there's so much like pretending sometimes, like you have to pretend to like a certain thing or pretend like everything's going great. And it's okay to be honest and be like, you know what? This week sucked. I need a new week. Or I've been counting down till I'm done with potty training or whatever it is. It's okay to be honest. It's okay to be true to who you are and put it out there, because I think it allows, being vulnerable allows you to connect with other moms. So that's why we love doing these mom confessions, and we're going to try to start doing them probably once a week or so. All right, here we go. Tatiana. For me, breastfeeding is awful. Especially with oversupply. I know it's supposed to be this magical bond and fun and easy, but I just don't see how. I get cranky when my boobs are full. The time spent pumping and bagging is time I could be spent doing things with my kids, and I can't. Hey, I'm sure so many people can relate to that, and there's nothing to feel guilty or bad about. This is how you feel, and you are allowed and deserving to feel it. And also, it's not for everyone, and it's not always going to be this great bond either. Some people really love doing it, some hate doing it, and then there's in between where you kind of go up and down. So that's a great confession because it's real. Number 2, anonymous. I told my son's friend he wasn't at home because I didn't feel like watching an extra kid for the next few hours. It had been a really long, stressful day. If they played independently, I'd be fine, but they're both constantly following me and asking me a million questions. So I lied to a 5-year-old, and I don't feel bad yet. I mean, again, like, you have to have certain boundaries. If you don't feel like, again, you know, you'd be watching another kid and you're like, you know what? It's been a long day. I'm just going to say he's not home. He can't play right now. And you don't have to feel guilty for that. And I'm glad you don't feel bad for it, because I think there's this like idea that you have to like say yes or like do all these things in order to be a good mom. And that's not true. You're allowed to say no, and you're allowed to have, again, your boundaries. Okay, number 3, Kate. I can't deal with toys that make too much noise or a big mess. My little girl got a 500-piece puzzle for her birthday and I threw it away. Am I a bad mom? No, 100% no. Also, I mean, I don't know how old your daughter is, but a 500-piece puzzle, like, that's like 500-piece puzzles, like a lot for me. I mean, sometimes I do 1,000 sometimes, but a 500-piece for your little girl, again, I don't know how old she is, but if you're in the Facebook group, she's got to be at least like, she's probably around 4, or if not younger. Yeah, I don't blame you. I mean, maybe donate next time. Don't just throw it away because someone might want it. But no, I totally get it. That's a huge mess. And that seems like a lot for that age, but I don't know. Okay, number 4, Jenna. I actually love when my baby falls asleep in the car. It's an excuse to get a milkshake and fries and just play around on my phone until he wakes up. I love this. I love this because you need to find the time to take care of you. And if taking care of you means driving through a drive-thru and getting a milkshake with fries, that's it. That's my kind of girl. I mean, I'm someone that loves ice cream, so milkshake, yes, please. And it's just kind of being like, okay, baby fell asleep. It's my time to take care of myself. I'm gonna be alone, scroll on my phone, do all the things I don't normally get to do. Love it. Number 5, Deborah. I hide tons of veggies in my kids' food, and now that they're old enough to help, they see what they've been eating. That was a hilarious revelation. Well, I would like to know, now that they see that you put the veggies in the food, like if they're still open to it, you win. I mean, that's amazing, because they're probably like, this tastes really good. Like, I love this food. Oh, you put broccoli in there? Didn't even know, but I love it. I mean, hey. Now, if they're like, you put broccoli in there, I don't want to eat that anymore. You won for a while, and now it's just like, you'll have to find a new way. Give them like brownie cookies, or not brownie cookies. What are those called? Zucchini cookies. Zucchini brownie cookies. There's like zucchini brownies or something where you like sneak the veggies in there. Number 6, Nicole. Sometimes when I need the little to entertain himself so I can cook dinner, I take a handful of Cheerios and throw them on the kitchen floor. It takes him at least 20 minutes for him to locate and eat them all. I figure the germs boost his immune system. Win-win. Hey, that makes it kind of like a fun little game. Get the Cheerios, and then, you know, mom can cook, do her thing. Gotta be creative, and it sounds like you are, so I agree. It's a win-win. Number 7, Anonymous. Yesterday, I went upstairs to do laundry. My toddler didn't want to come with me, so I sent him back into the living room. My husband didn't get the message, and my son did not go upstairs. About 10 minutes went by, small child unattended, before we realized he wasn't with either of us. Thankfully, nothing bad happened. You know what? You just gotta count your lucky stars and just be like, you know what? He was fine. He was good. I got my thing done. My husband got his thing done. It's good. Nothing bad happens. Just, you're good. All right. Number 8, Angie. My toddler loves watching the same shows over and over and over. Whenever I get tired of seeing a certain show, I just tell her they don't work on our TV anymore. I mean, is that a confession, or is that just being really smart? I mean, I've heard of parents saying the park is closed. You gotta get creative and do what works for you. And if hearing the same show is going to make your head explode, you are doing everyone a favor by saying the show just doesn't work anymore. So it's smart. All right. That's all the confessions I have for this week. Thank you everyone for submitting your confessions. We got a lot of good ones in our Facebook group this week, so stay on the lookout for future questions. We usually post them every single Friday, and they're always kind of fun, but we do have mom confessions at least once a week because we love hearing from you. All right, that's all I have this week, and I will see you next week for a new episode of Mom Talks with Christa. Bye, guys. Thank you so much for watching this episode. Before you go, make sure you like, subscribe, and ring that bell so you get notified of future episodes. We release new episodes every single Wednesday. See you next week.